What's going on, YouTube? I'm Glenniford, and today we're going to take a look at Savage Worlds at a glance. And man, this is I love Savage Worlds. I love this rule system. I love the settings and everything. I just want to give you just enough just to kind of tickle your fancy a little bit, whet your palate, maybe give you an idea of what Savage Worlds is all about. So some of the things that make Savage Worlds different right out the gate. Number one is going to be how the skills and attributes work. It's going to be different than many other games that you might be used to, not to put you in a box, but you're not getting flat modifiers. Those days are done, kind of. There's ways to get flat modifiers, but generally speaking, whenever you are going to upgrade a skill or an attribute, you don't get that. So you start off with a D4. A D4. That's right. So you will roll that D4, and whatever you roll, whenever somebody tells you to roll, let's say, shooting, whenever you're trying to shoot your crossbow, you're going to roll that D4, and whatever you roll, that's what you get. In Savage Worlds, you're typically looking for a 4. So that's one of the beautiful things about Savage Worlds. Just remember the number 4. More often than not, remembering the number 4, you will know when you roll if you have succeeded or not. There's none of this like, I gotta know that I'm shooting for a 10 or a 15 or a 20 or a 25 because of the level of complexity of the lock or any of that. No, just remember 4, and you'll know if you've got modifiers because the GM should tell you before you roll your dice. Shooting. You put 1 point into shooting, you get a D4. You put another point into shooting, you now have a D6. You put another point, you got a D8. Another point, a D10, another point, a D12, and then you stop. If you're a normal human, in some settings, you may be able to go to a D12 plus 1, D12 plus 2, but it does not go to a D20. The only time you're really going to be using your D20 is if you're rolling on tables. And yeah, I think that's the main reason is tables. The dice, the skills, the attributes. That's number 1. Number 2, you will have a wild die because you, my friend, have plot armor and you are very important to the game. So whenever you roll, unlike a majority of the enemies that you may face and NPCs, you may have a D6 in shooting. So you roll this D6, but you also roll an additional D6. So if this one fails you and rolls a 3, this one might roll a 5. And as we know, the target number is 4. So a 5 would be a success. In addition to that, the dice explode! And exploding dice are one of the coolest things that have existed in any board game or tabletop game. This is not the only one that does it, but what that means, if you don't already know, is if you roll the maximum value on your skill die or your wild die, you roll another one. And if that was the case, your total would then be an 8. And an 8 is a success with a raise because every 4 is an additional level. Second edition Pathfinder is doing something kind of like this too, where there's levels of success as opposed to just a 1 and a 20 and then everything in between if it's a success or a failure. Bennies. You don't have to use these for bennies, but this is the default, which are poker chips. I would like to challenge you that whenever you're creating a game, feel free to use something that you think will be cool for the setting that you're playing in. My first game, it was a super style game and everyone was getting powers from this like super powered crystal meth that was from some company umbrella style, right? And what I gave them was these tiny little rocks that I bought for I got a lot of them for like $2. And I think they usually go in like fish tanks. And I used those for bennies because it kind of looked like super powered crystal meth. So yeah, so feel free to use that. In East Texas University, I use these other weird little tokens and stuff that look like runes, I think. So yeah, feel free to get creative, make stuff, go nuts. The bennies are fun. And what the bennies do is they allow you to reroll dice, they allow you to soak damage so you don't have to take that damage, they allow you to influence the story, they allow you to get cards, which I'll touch on next, if the card you got wasn't to your liking. So yes, bennies are the lifeblood of Savage Worlds. What you may not realize is this little guy is what's giving you narrative control. So maybe your character, you feel like your character is supposed to be really good at shooting and maybe not good at persuasion. So let's say, for example, you have a D6 in shooting, which is average in Savage Worlds, but let's say you keep rolling 2s and 3s because you don't have a flat modifier, right? So yeah, you keep rolling low, that's where you spend the bennies. You spend the bennies on what's important to you. But on the flip side of that, maybe shooting's not important to you. Maybe persuading somebody is what is very important to you because your relationship to that character, or maybe because you feel like your character is supposed to be really good at persuading other people. That's where you use those bennies. And the GM should be awarding you additional bennies for things that the GM wants to see in their game, whether it is role-playing, creativity, working towards their hindrances, just how much they're getting into character, whatever it is, they should be awarding those bennies for that reason. There are cards in Savage Worlds, so make sure you got a deck of cards. The Jokers, they play a very important role. They give people bennies, and it's mainly going to be for initiative, but it also plays into some other systems that I'm going to touch on in some other videos because this is at a glance. So you've got the cards, you've got the settings. There are so many settings. My God, look at, and these are just official ones that Pinnacle has put out. Holy Jesus, there's a lot. And that's just physically what I have within arm's reach. There are a lot that are also on SWADE, which is the Savage World Adventurers Guild. And you can be Power Rangers. You can go to Reddit and find Elder Scrolls settings. You can do whatever you want in Savage Worlds, which is one of the main reasons that I love Savage Worlds. It is, that portion alone is incredible. So if I want to be in a spaceship today, and I want to be in a zombie apocalypse tomorrow, and then I want to be a college student that does rituals, and then maybe the day after that I want to be a superhero, I can do all of those things in different games within Savage Worlds. So the settings are great for all you GMs out there, especially if you're brand new. And this is why Savage Worlds speaks to me. I'm gonna be honest with you. I don't have all the time in the world. Maybe if I got into tabletop role-playing games like 10 years ago, then maybe I would have more time to dive into something that's a little bit more robust and something that really, you really gotta make sure you memorize like 12 different status effects as opposed to the like 6 that's in Savage Worlds, and they're pretty easy to remember. So simplicity, simplicity, simplicity. Making a character is simple. Game prep is simple. Enemies is incredibly simple. You don't even really have to build them. You can kind of, once you get the ball rolling, it's kind of in your head. If there's something that's a little bit more involved and intense, by all means, feel free to write down your notes. But yeah, you don't really got to keep track of all the skills. There's just some simple math in terms of just knowing what their toughness might be. You don't got to really track hit points. They're extras, so you should be slaughtering them pretty easily for the most part. So yeah, simplicity, simplicity, simplicity. But in its simplicity, there's also this beautiful tactical layer to Savage Worlds, because you could tell there's like some roots in war gaming here, where first of all, everything's measured in inches. You don't have to convert feet or anything like that. Also, cover is awesome. It makes a big difference in this game, especially. Shooting somebody with a gun and hitting them with a melee weapon and throwing a grenade all feel different. Hitting them with a spell also feels different. Mechanically, thematically, it's not, there's not just one number that you have to pass and that's it regardless of the situation. So that adds some tactics to the situation. So maybe you got this really good fighter and it's really hard to get past their parry. Maybe they got a big shield and all this stuff, right? You have other options. It kind of gives you like a rock, paper, scissors situation that ideally the party is taking advantage of. And that is just anytime there's something that is easy to learn but difficult to master, those are typically the things that kind of pull me in. So, and I did allude to this earlier, for you GMs out there, little prep, very little prep. There's times where my players have really flown off the rails and decided to do some random stuff. And it was easy enough for me to just whip something up, and just knowing that if these are average fighters, they've got a D6 in fighting, which means they've got a 5 parry. And if they've got average vigor, then they've also got a 5 toughness. Maybe they've got light armor on. They've got some hide armor. They've got a 6 toughness then. So I'm sure that sounds like, oh my God, Glenaford, you know the game so well, that's why. No, I'm new. I'm in the trenches with you guys, learning all these new games. And yeah, no, it's just that easy. So little prep is huge. Little prep is huge. And then last point I want to make regarding Savage Worlds is that it gives you this wonderful cinematic feeling. Savage Worlds tagline is fast, furious, fun. And that really goes hand in hand with the cinematic gameplay. You can have these Blues Brothers style car chases in Savage Worlds, and it can really feel alive. Same thing with mass battles, and you've got commanders on the battlefield. Picturing like Game of Thrones, where Jon Snow was there and the cavalry came in at the last second, right? Like you can have moments like that. And with that said, Savage Worlds is not always, it's got two, like a micro and a macro level. The cinematic nature of Savage Worlds, where there's just these really cool moments, it definitely plays into like the pulpy nature. I like it though, I like it. If you want like a gritty realism, that can also exist in the game too, but you always have the option there, which is nice, which is what is great about Savage Worlds, is that you have those options. And there's all kinds of ways to hack this apart, sideways, crisscross, however you need to do it. And yeah, it's a great book. You know, it's not like a massive book, so it's not like it's going to take you too long to go through it. There's all different types of recommendations in here. Obviously, going through the rules system, there's all different kinds of things that you can implement into your game, but you don't necessarily have to. So yeah, Savage Worlds, highly recommend it. Just give it a shot. So that was Savage Worlds at a glance. My name is Glenaford. If you're looking for a fresh new perspective on tabletop role-playing games, and you're kind of just sick of the same old, feel free to give me a like, subscribe, and yeah, my name is Glenaford, signing out. The dice, hey Finn, the dice explode. Did you know the dice explode? Finn, the dice. Does that explode too? The dice explode! The dice explode, Finn! The dice explode!